What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only NIO stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to do some in-depth technical analysis to give you guys my price prediction for tomorrow based off what the charts are showing, based off what the data is suggesting. I'm also going to break down what the data is showing for the overall market, how this may affect NIO, and some very important factors you need to consider over the next couple of days that will affect NIO's share price. Now, before I break anything down, before I get into any more details, I still have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire NIO community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, whether it's $1 or $100, guys, it's up to you. You're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is any could be a free Tesla share, a free Apple share, or a mix of all of them. The offer ends in just 2 days. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Looking at NIO, this thing is in a very interesting position. This thing's up about 0.15%, 0.2% for the day. I did predict a big move by NIO to actually fill the gap it formed initially. I predicted NIO would get a push up to about 10.8, then get a small rejection off that and maybe close somewhat green. Instead, what's happening is NIO did get a big push to the upside. It is slowing down a bit, but we are going to see if this thing can actually close green. I'm actually recording this before the market ended up closing, but there are some things I want to talk about for tomorrow that are very important. All right, because the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, these things are starting to come down a bit. And this is due to the fact that there were some new pieces of news coming out in China, guys. Things are getting worse over there with the whole protests against the new policies. And this is actually becoming more and more extreme as the day goes on. This is not good for the stock market. It's not good for any investors out there. And this is going to be very important for future policies. This really affects the USA as China makes up a very, very large sector in the United States manufacturing. And this is part of the reason why the market is starting to come down. It's leading to more fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Now, the market coming down did actually dictate NIO to some degree. As you can see, NIO did end up kind of selling off as the day went on, but we did get that nice move to the upside I expected to open. However, for tomorrow, I do anticipate that the market's not going to look too great. I expect basically very boring sideways action because you have to remember that on Wednesday, we have Jerome Powell speaking at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So when Jerome Powell ends up talking on Wednesday, there's a chance his words may actually cause the market to crash, or he could cause the market to actually pump. Either one of those are very possible. And I don't believe that everything Jerome Powell says is solely just to move the markets. I don't think he's just constantly staring at the markets and just trying that. I think that the market is more reactive to what he says, and he knows it, which is why he is very careful at certain periods of times. But like I said before, it could really go either way depending on what he ends up saying. Now, could Powell say things because he wants the market to actually move in a certain direction? I mean, sure, that's very possible, but I do believe that he's going to kind of focus on the script he already set, and the market's going to determine which direction it chooses based off that. As far as SPY goes, there's something I wanted to note. As you can see right now on SPY, we are seeing a very interesting put to call ratio. As of right now, I think the put to call ratio is still a lot higher for the put side than that of the calls. It's over 1 to 2 for many, many days going forward. This shows that a lot of investors are still over leveraged on the put side, which means that the market makers are still incentivized to cause the market to pump, at least again. Now, does this mean this always has to happen? Well, we have a high put to call ratios almost every single day up until the end of December. And clearly, the market's not going to hold up for that long, in my opinion. There is going to be a big reversal relatively soon. This means that eventually, yes, the market will still come down despite this. And for this week, it could even happen, but it's going to depend heavily on what Jerome Powell ends up saying. Looking at the data for NIO, NIO is actually pretty flat right now in terms of its price pairs ratio. NIO is not outperforming or underperforming compared to before. It's just pretty flat as of right now. There's actually a lot of volume around this key demand zone at about $10, so watch that very carefully. And also note that NIO has a tendency of being green about 55% of the time on Tuesdays. For November, NIO is green about 50% of the time, so watch that very carefully. And finally, it's important to note that the overall short interest is starting to trend down, which is a pretty decent sign for NIO. However, when it does tend to trend down like this, we tend to see spikes to the upside like this, which means that this is incentivizing more shorts to start coming in. So now, when it comes to the overall price action, what we should be watching for, NIO is not in the best of states. And I say this because now the overall market is starting to pick a direction, and I believe the market is set for some kind of boring sideways price action until Powell finally comes. What does this mean for SPY? Could we see a big reversal tomorrow? I mean, I don't really see it happening that way. The overall trend looks pretty strong to the downside. The bears are gaining some strong control, and this momentum is now shifting for this gap fill, which could happen very soon down to the 394s. And if that's the case, the next key zone to watch for is between 390 to about 392. The zone right here is where I think SPY could end up going to and maybe get a nice bounce. However, remember what happened a couple of days ago. We had a big gap down to 390. All right. Then just like 3, 4 days later, this thing went from all the way down to 390, and then this thing managed to pop all the way up within a couple of days to about that 403 level. So the market could make a big bounce depending on the news. All right. So what I think is going to happen is we're likely going to continue to trade kind of sideways here, maybe start forming a base around 392 or so. Maybe we touch about 390. I don't really guarantee that, but I do believe it's going to get pretty boring for tomorrow and also going into Wednesday. It's going to be a little bit boring. There's going to be one Fed speaker coming out before Powell, so maybe the market trades kind of sideways until then. But then when Powell ends up coming, there's a good chance we're going to continue the trend. The market could get rejected early and just start coming down pretty hard from this resistance level. Or what could happen is Powell pumps us up and we get a big push all the way back to about 407 before we see another big rejection. Either one of those are very, very possible. As far as the trend goes, we have some momentum to continue pushing. Technically, we aren't making lower lows. So there is momentum and potential for SPY to get a big bounce. If that's the case, that could help NIO. But until then, I expect some more kind of sideways, not the best type of price action. Now, NIO is a little bit red, completely normal, completely fine. But the key zone to watch for is that $10 support zone. Break below that, and this thing is going to likely come all the way down to about 9.7 or so. That's another key zone to watch where we've seen NIO actually hold this level and kind of bounce. And I'm not saying 9.7 perfectly. It's like 9.67 to like 9.75, pretty close between 9.7. So what I predict for NIO is this. So we had the inverse head and shoulders formation right here, and we got a big push to the upside. Now we're starting to come down. It looks like we completed it in a way. So I predict that NIO is likely going to trade sideways tomorrow. NIO might push up to about 10.2, 10.4 into open. Then it's going to start downtrending, and this thing is likely going to retest 10, break below that, and we can see this thing come all the way down to about 9.67 or so. If this thing does not hold 9.67 or so, we could likely see it come down even harder, but be very careful. I'm not really anticipating that. I think NIO is more likely to actually hold these levels. On the 30-minute time frame, if you look at NIO, all right, we got a bounce of 9.7. It has to. It really has to. If this thing does not hold 9.7, all right, it starts coming down to like the 9.6s, it doesn't hold, it's going to crash all the way down to about 9.25. So that's why I want to see NIO hold 9.7 or so. It has to. Now, if NIO does not end up holding it, right? If it does end up holding it, we could see a pretty decent bounce. The most bullish case for NIO would be Powell ends up talking and NIO gets a big push, and we end up retesting the resistance line right here around the 11s. But like I said before, guys, I don't expect too much from NIO because of that, because the market's starting to slow down, and this will have an effect on NIO. Not to mention the fact that the news involving China is also becoming more extreme. This is also negative news for NIO. So I predict for tomorrow, boring sideways action, small pop into open, followed by a bit of a sell-off, and we could retest 9.7. And then where we go on Wednesday is going to depend on Powell. That's essentially what I have for this video. Now, as far as just a couple of technicals go on the daily on NIO, it's pretty boring sideways action. There's not much there. The volume is decreasing a bit, which is not the best of signs. It's just okay volume. It's not really that bad. And then finally, I wanted to talk about our MACD right down here. As you can see, RSI is at about 43, and the MACD, not sure why it's not loading. Anyways, about the MACD, what I'm essentially seeing is we have an opening right here between the signal line and the MACD. This is a decent sign that NIO has some good momentum, but it's starting to close. This is a sign that NIO is getting tighter and starting to actually kind of hold these levels, but get tight. Now, if this crosses to the downside and we start to see some bearish momentum, RSI will likely start to come down. NIO is going to lose some strength. And like I mentioned, this thing could come down to about 9.25 pretty fast if it does not hold 9.67 to 9.7. So please watch it very carefully. We need to see this thing hold. All right. But anyways, for tomorrow, like I said, I anticipate some sideways action, maybe another pretty flat day, and that could be kind of red for NIO. So please watch it very carefully. And the bigger day is going to be Wednesday. Thank you all so much for listening. Have an absolutely incredible rest of the day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. NIO to the moon, because the long-term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.